Welcome to this episode of BizJet TV. We're going to be talking about the hidden costs of private jet travel. This is something that's everyone's talking about lately. The cost of these things. The recent copy of Avbuyer magazine just arrived this morning. My article in here this month is about the professional golfing world and how a lot of professional golfers use the private jet to help them with their peak performance. You can click on the link below to read that article online. But one of my colleagues from Avbuyer magazine has written an interesting story. It's called "Loaf of Bread Outpaces New Business Jet Price Increases." So everything has increased in price. It says here the US government CPI data since 2020, consumer prices have risen by some 21%. So has the price of private jets risen? Well, if we look across the board of new deliveries and that, the average price of a private jet has increased by about $1 million. The aircraft that's rising has risen quite a bit, and it's also the aircraft that maintains its value the best has always been the Pilatus PC-12 and now the Pilatus PC-24, which is the jet that Pilatus build that can land on grass that we have talked about quite often here on BizJet TV. It's a very high quality product, designed, built in Switzerland, and they only build a certain number a year. And so obviously there aren't that many in circulation. Of course, there are more PC-12s, which has been on the market. There's about 1,600 of them worldwide. The PC-24, there's a lot less. There's probably maybe 100 of them in the world, if that. And because it's a fairly new airplane. And if you bought a PC-24 last year, you could sell it today and make $1 million profit. But that's very, very rare that would happen on a private jet. So that's what happens on the acquisition front. This is just something that's happening in the economy at the moment. We're predicting that the price of fuel will start to drop next year, and as a result of America looking like their election is going in a certain direction, so they will start to drill for oil in their own country, and this will bring the price of oil down worldwide, and so the cost of private jet travel will come down, the cost of operating your own jet will come down, and the cost of everything will come down because of the price of oil. But talking about private jets and aviation in general, I do some charters for some clients. They call me up and ask me if I can organize a charter. And I always tell them this. I said, look, if you're going to go online and go on these fancy apps and you're aiming for the cheapest price, you'll get the cheapest price. But what you don't understand is that cheap price has a hidden cost built into it. I had a conversation this morning with somebody saying to me, oh yeah, we're going to go with so-and-so company, but they've got new airplanes and they're cheaper. And I said, yes, I know. And the reason why they are cheaper is because they overwork their crew. And pilot fatigue is something that I talk about in my book, The Quantum Economy, and I've talked about here on Business. And I've experienced this myself. A fatigued pilot is like a drunk pilot. This particular company, what they do is they fly their pilots around the world for about 22 days on the trot. And I've spoken to a number of them, and they tell me this is the common thread that I get from these pilots, is I wake up in the morning in my hotel room and I don't know if it's morning, afternoon or evening, and I don't even know where I am in the world until I suddenly recall where I am, and then off I go again. And they're flying around the world for 22 days, constantly fatigued. Then they're allowed to go home for 5 or 6 days, and then they're back again for another 22 days. Now, those 5 days are not enough to recuperate from such a grueling schedule. There are some other carriers out there which use what they call 7-5 roster, where you're on for 7 days and you're off for 5 days. Now, that is a very, very safe roster. And I would say if you're going to, charter from somebody that has that kind of roster, that's a really, really good thing, because these people need to rest. It's a bit like a professional footballer or tennis player or golfer. You need to rest in between. You need to get your sleep and you need to rest so you don't end up injured. But in the case of a pilot, you need to rest so that you can perform at your best and so that you don't perform like a drunk pilot. And so that's really, really important. When you look at the spreadsheets of these private jet companies, the margins are very, very tight. Okay. So if they're offering a cheaper price than everybody else, they're cutting corners somewhere. That's the hidden cost. It's your safety. That's the fact. I mean, I talk about it in the quantum economy. Not many people talk about this. The fact that the private jet world has 9.2 times worse safety factor than the airlines. You look at the number of passengers flown, percentage of flights compared to crashes, and you compare those, and the ratios and whatnot, and you clearly see now. Of course, in my last video, I talked about safety has improved over the last 12 months, which is good, and a lot of this is down to the fact that more and more private jet owners now are realizing, they need to invest in training. They need to invest in more modern avionics, which improves situational awareness for pilots. So this is they realize, going around is not a bad thing. If your pilot suddenly comes in high, or for another reason they have to go around because the aircraft was not on what's called a stabilized approach, that is actually a safe thing for them to do that. And pilots need to be encouraged to fly safe. And when you fly for the airlines, you've got your standard operating procedures, and you're basically in charge. You're the captain on the flight deck. You've got 180 people sitting behind you, and if you decide to go around, you go around. On a private jet, very often, the weather's a bit iffy. You let the boss know, but the boss has got a meeting. He really needs you to land there. And pilots get pushed. I often talk about my friend Eric Swaffer. He was the pilot of the Leicester City Football Club helicopter that crashed, and unfortunately he lost his life, his girlfriend, and also the boss, the owner of Leicester City Football Club, a few years ago. And Eric was telling me before this thing happened, he said, he wasn't happy taking out of the stadium there with the helicopter, because you're just going up like that. There's no forward motion, and if something happens before that transition, you're toast. And that's exactly what happened. There was a failure, a screw came loose. In that case, there's nothing really you can do, and unfortunately Eric lost his life. Now, he told the boss that he wasn't comfortable. The boss turned around and said, well, I'm paying you a lot of money. The other pilots flew in and out the stadium. If you don't like it, you can leave. I'll just hire somebody else. This was his attitude. So, this is dangerous, and it's dangerous, and it cost somebody's life, a dear friend of mine. So, you've got to be careful. So if you're looking and going on these apps to book your private jet flight, you're aiming for price, you're doing the wrong thing. What you really need is you need a broker like myself or somebody else that looks at safety first. And you're looking to fly safe, not cheap. Private jet travel is not cheap. It shouldn't be cheap, and you shouldn't go for the cheapest option. You really need to go for an operator that trains their pilots in a certain way, that rosters them in a certain way, and and the new aircraft doesn't mean that it's going to be safe. Because as I always tell people, the most important thing in your private jet operation are your pilots. Why? They fly you, they need to be rested, they need to be well paid, they need to make sure the maintenance is done properly so they're comfortable to fly the airplane, and they need to be in charge when they're on the airplane, not you. So this is really, really important. So people get lost in, it's a new airplane, it's shiny, it's got a new interior, and then they just go on the cheap, so we'll hire a pilot for 150,000 instead of 250,000. Well, that's not a good idea. And if you are looking to buy a private jet, these things aren't cheap. Okay, there's a reason why there are only 21 to 22,000 private jets in the world. There's a reason for that number, and if you calculate how many owners there are, we're talking probably about 18,000 people out of 8 billion that actually own an airplane. There's a reason for that, okay? But these things need to be operated in a safe manner. So that's the hidden cost. The hidden cost of private jet travel, if you're getting it cheap, they're cutting corners somewhere, and the corners they're cutting are on flight safety. So be very, very careful. I turn clients down all the time. When they start playing the price game with me, I say, there's a reason for the price. I only use a set number of people. And if we're buying an airplane for you, we need to hire these pilots for this reason and not these ones over here. And these pilots need to be trained this way, not that way. There's a reason for that. Private jet pilots fly a lot less than the airline pilots. They need more training in order to be ready to spring into action if and when something goes wrong, so that they can keep you safe. And that's really, really important. I can't emphasize the point more than I have done on this video today. So that's all from me on this episode of BizJet TV. Check out this other one we did recently on aircraft accidents that just happened this year in the first 6 months of the year, and you can see what happened and that safety record is improving. So that's really, really good news. And grab yourself a copy of The Quantum Economy if you haven't done so already, and also check out my articles in Avbuyer magazine. You can click on the links below for that. And that's all from Fabrizio here on BizJet TV. I'll see you in the next one.